Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hi everyone, welcome to the lecture number 14, the first lecture on labor market equilibrium. So far we discussed about the labor supply, labor demand, we discussed about the economic impact of labor market policies on labor demand and labor supply, how policies affect demand for labor and supply of labor. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the labor market equilibrium in detail. So, we have seen that workers prefer to work when the wage is high and the firm prefers to hire when the wage is low. The labor market equilibrium balances out the conflicting desire of workers and firms and determines the wage and employment observed in the labor market. Let us put labor supply and demand together to look at how this wage and employment might be determined. So, by understanding how equilibrium is reached, we can address what is perhaps the most interesting question in the labor economics, that why do wages and employment go up and down? This module analyzes the properties of equilibrium in a perfectly competitive labor market. We will see that if markets are competitive and if the firms and the workers are free to enter and leave the markets, the equilibrium allocation of the firms and the workers is efficient. Therefore, the sorting of workers to the firms maximizes the total gains that the workers and the firms accumulate by trading with each other. The neoclassical model assumes the perfect competition in the input and in the output markets. In this context, if you recall Adam Smith's famous invisible hand theorem, in his invisible hand theorem, Adam Smith talks about that the labor market participant, they participate and they are in search of their own selfish goal to attain an outcome that no one in the market consciously sought to achieve. So, Adam Smith's invisible hand theorem suggests that individuals pursuing their self-interest in a competitive market inadvertently contribute to the overall welfare of the society. According to Smith, when individuals seek to maximize their own profit or utility, they are led by this invisible hand to allocate the resources efficiently and produce goods and services that meet societal needs. So, in the labor market, workers seeking higher wage and the employers seeking lower cost naturally interact to determine wage and employment level without any central coordination. However, this decentralized process results in an equilibrium where the supply of and the demand for labor are balanced, which leads to a optimal outcome for both workers and the firms. Therefore, the invisible hand theorem highlights the power of the market forces to coordinate economic activity and generate mutual beneficial outcomes even without explicit planning or direction. So, the implication that these competitive labor markets are efficient and plays an important role in framing public policies. In fact, the impact of many government programs is often debated in the terms of whether the particular policy leads to a more efficient allocation of resources or whether the efficiency cost are substantial. Further, we will also analyze in this module the properties of labor market equilibrium under alternative market structures such as monopsonies, monopolies. In monopsonies, where there is only one buyer of labor, where the monopoly is where there is only one seller of the output. So, each of these market structures generates an equilibrium with its own unique features. We will discuss in our subsequent lectures. So, the monopsonist for instance generally hire fewer workers and pay less than competitive firm. How workers get discriminated and exploited in this monopsony and monopoly market structure, we will discuss in detail in this module. Finally, we will also discuss on a number of policy applications such as taxes, subsidies, immigration, to show how government policies shift the labor market to a different equilibrium, thereby altering the economic opportunity available to both farm and workers. We have already briefly discussed how a competitive labor market attains equilibrium. Now, I will provide a more detailed discussion on this equilibrium in the competitive labor market and the properties of this competitive labor market. So, the property of a single competitive labor market is that there are many buyers and there are many sellers. In a competitive labor market, there are large number of employers or buyers of the labor and large number of workers, those who are seller of the labor. Both are ensuring that no single entity has significant market power to dictate the wage or employment condition in the economy. So, there is a presence of large number of buyers and large number of sellers, that is the first property. The second property of a single competitive labor market is there must be perfect information. The participants in the competitive labor market have access to complete information regarding the job opportunities, wages, the working conditions. This allows the worker to make informed decision about their employment options and enables the farms to efficiently allocate the resources. So, the perfect information is a necessary condition. The third property of a single competitive market is the homogeneous. The products are homogeneous. When we say products are homogeneous, here we take into consideration the jobs. The jobs in a competitive labor market are relatively standardized with similar job roles, skills required, the working conditions across the farms within the same industry or sector. So, in that sense, the jobs are homogeneous, the similar conditions, same characteristics. Further, the fourth property is the free entry and free exit. The workers are free to enter or exit the labor market based on their preferences and opportunities, and the farms can enter or exit the industries without any significant barriers. So, the workers and the farms, they can anytime enter into the labor market, they can anytime get out of the labor market. This ensures the labor market participants can respond to the changes in the demand and supply conditions without any difficulty. Next is the perfect mobility. When we talk about perfect mobility, labor is perfectly mobile within the market, means workers can move freely between the different geographical locations, industries to seek most favorable employment opportunities. So, this ensures that labor resources are efficiently allocated across the economy. Further, wage determination is done by demand and supply of labor. Wages in a competitive labor market are determined by the interaction of supply and demand forces. So, when there is excess demand for labor, wages tend to rise and attracting more workers to the market. Conversely, when there is excess supply of labor, wages tends to fall and leading to adjustment in the employment levels. So, the demand and supply of labor decides that what will be the level of wage rate and what will be the level of employment in the economy. Further, there is no market power. Both the agents, the buyers and sellers, they do not have any market power to influence the market outcomes. In a competitive labor market, no single employer or a group of employers, they have the ability to influence the wages or employment conditions through monopolistic practices or collusion. So, instead wage and working conditions are determined by the market forces, demand and supply. So, there is no market power with the individuals, they can influence this. Further, it is a long run equilibrium. Neoclassicals believe in long run equilibrium. In the long run, a competitive labor market tends towards equilibrium, where the quantity of labor supplied equals the quantity of labor demanded at a wage rate that clears the market, which we call the market clearing wage rate. This equilibrium ensures that resources are efficiently allocated and there is no persistent imbalance between this labor supply and demand. So, economy tends towards an equilibrium in the long run. These properties they are characterized the economy or the market as a competitive market, where the competition among the employers and the workers leads to efficient outcomes and optimal allocation of labor resources within the economy. When we try to understand how this equilibrium is achieved in a single competitive labor market, we have considered these properties of labor market where there are large number of buyers and sellers are there and perfect information is available, the jobs are homogeneous, there is free entry and free exit of the workers and the farms in the market, and there is a perfect mobility among the workers in order to achieve the efficient allocation of resources. Further, the wage is determined by the supply and demand for labor, and there is no market power among these workers and the farms to influence these market outcomes of this wage and employment, and there is a long run equilibrium. So, these are the properties on which this competitive labor market stands and the economic outcomes of the competitive labor market stands. So, as we discussed that the wage and the employment is decided by the market demand and supply forces. So, here we have taken this is the labor market, and on the x axis we have taken the quantity of labor and the y axis we have taken the wage rate, and the labor supply function is upward sloping and the labor demand function is downward sloping, and this labor demand function is governed by the marginal product of labor, and interaction of these supply and demand forces decides that this is the market clearing wage rate and this is the amount of employment in the economy. So, at this point there is no excess demand and excess supply. So, this is decided in the market, labor market. Each individual farms, they accept this wage rate because they do not have the capacity to influence this wage rate. So, at this going wage rate, so all the workers are ready to supply their labor with this going wage rate to this particular farm. Now, how much of labor should be employed, it purely depends on the demand for labor by that particular farm, which is guided by the marginal product of labor. So, the supply function of that particular farm labor supply function is perfectly elastic, and with this downward sloping of labor demand function, the farm decides that how much of workers should be employed. So, the farm is a wage taker, he accept the wage. Now, neoclassical model talks about that well, there could be some temporary differences in the wages within the homogeneous jobs across the farms or within this local labor markets. Now, let us say, but in the long run they will tend to adjust towards the wage rate, there will be a long run adjustment. Now, the economy is at equilibrium with W wage rate and E employment level with this demand function and with this supply function. Let us say the demand for labor has increased due to certain structural changes which happen in the economy. Now, the demand function has shifted from D to D dash. As a result, you can see that for a short run the wages may increase from W to W dash, and there could be an employment increase from E to E dash. Now, why there will be a short run spike in the wage rate? Because it is very difficult to increase the labor supply overnight. So, it takes some time to increase the labor supply, to gain some training skills. So, slowly this increase in the wage rate will attract new workers to enter into the labor market or to gain certain skills in that particular sector which is required. So, slowly over a period of time this supply function will increase and the shift in the supply function will shift from S to S dash. As a result, what we will see that there could be short run fluctuations in the employment and the wage rate, but in the long run it will slowly get adjusted as there is an increase in the supply function and it will come back to this long run wage rate. So, neoclassicals they are saying that well, there could be short run differences, but in the long run it will get adjusted. It is completely based on the demand and supply forces. So, the implication of this neoclassical model is that wages are equalized across the homogeneous workers and the homogeneous farms. No incentive for the farms to pay high wage rate, as this will not affect the productivity. However, this does not imply that wages won't vary across different workers or across different farms. Second implication is that there is no involuntary unemployment. So, no individuals that would like to work at this going wage rate who are unable to find work. So, only individuals who would not work at this going wage rate, but would at a higher wage rate, they are only unemployed. So, there is no involuntary unemployment. Third is that there is no queue to the work for certain farms, means all the farms they are same in terms of working conditions, job securities, job opportunities. So, no reason to worry about which farm you work for. So, these are the implications of this neoclassical model. Now, when we talk about this neoclassical model, another implication of this neoclassical model is that it attains the efficiency, it allocates the resources in the most efficient way. Now, how it happens, let us try to understand. So, when there is we have taken employment on this x axis and wage on this y axis, with this supply function and demand function, the economy is at equilibrium at the wage rate W star and the economy is employing E star amount of employment. Now, if you look at this point of this equilibrium, we are saying that producer surplus and the worker surplus is maximum. Now, the demand function, the demand curve is guided by the marginal product of labor, marginal physical product of labor. Now, let us say at E1 worker, his marginal product is this, whereas the farm is paying this much of wage rate. The second worker, the marginal product is, marginal revenue is this, but the farm is paying this much. So, if you join these points, this triangle is the farm's surplus, the producer surplus by employing this much of labor. So, by employing this much of labor O E star, the farm is getting the revenue of this much, but the farm is paying only this much. So, actually the farm is getting this much and the farm is paying this much. So, this much of gain in terms of producer surplus. Whereas, from the worker's perspective, if you look at it, the E1 worker is ready to work at this wage rate, but he is going to get the wage rate W star. The E2 worker is going to work at this wage rate. He was ready to willing to work at this wage rate, but he is getting the wage rate at this much. So, this is this much is the willingness of these workers, OE workers, to work with this wage rate, but actually they are getting the wage rate is this much. So, from the workers perspective, this is the workers surplus. So, if you add both these players, producer and the employer and the employees, from the employer's perspective, the triangle P is the surplus. From the workers perspective, Q, this triangle is the workers surplus. So, if you add these two, then this worker surplus and the producer surplus is maximum when the farm is operating at this point. So, the total gains from the trade occurring this national economy are given by the sum of the producer surplus and the worker surplus. So, the area P plus Q. The competitive market maximizes the total gains from the trade occurring to the economy. If you want to see that why we consider this E star is the maximum gain which we get from this trade off. Let us say EH amount of employment. Now, what is happening at this EH amount of employment? What is happening at this EL amount of employment? The excess workers at EH have the value of marginal product that is less than the value of time they could have spent elsewhere. So, in effect, this EH amount of workers, these workers are not being efficiently used by the labor market, they are better off somewhere else. Similarly, when we consider what would happen if the farm hires too few workers like EL, then the missing workers have the value of marginal product that they exceed the value of their time they could spend somewhere else. So, their resources would be more efficiently used if they could have worked. So, the allocation of the persons to the farm that maximizes the total gain from the trade in the labor market is called the efficient allocation. A competitive equilibrium generates an efficient allocation of labor resources. So, this discussion focused on these consequences of the equilibrium in the single competitive market. However, in practice, mostly you will find that the economies are consist of many labor markets, even for workers who have similar skills. So, these labor markets might be differentiated by region or by industry. So, there are different markets exist. Suppose there are two regional labor markets in the economy, one is north, another one is south. And we assume that these two markets employ workers of similar skills, so that the persons working in the north had perfectly substitute for the persons those who are working in the south. Let us say for simplicity, the supply curves are represented by vertical lines and implying that the supply is perfectly inelastic. Now, let us try to understand how the competitive equilibrium is achieved within these two different labor markets. Now, on this side we have taken this labor market for the north region, and on this side we have taken the labor market for the south region. And this is the demand function. Dn is demand for labor in the north labor market, and Sn is the supply function for the labor in the northern labor market, and the equilibrium wage rate is Wn, and this is the amount of employment which is there. Now, when it comes to southern side, the demand for labor is ds and the supply of labor is ss, the equilibrium wage rate is ws. Now, when the workers they look at these two markets in two different regions, you can see, so wage rate in the northern sector is much higher as compared to the wage rate in the southern sector. Can this wage differential between two regions persist and represent a true competitive equilibrium? Because we are saying that this equilibrium is achieved based on this demand and supply. So, can this wage differential between these two regions persist and represent a true competitive equilibrium? The answer is no. After all, the workers in the southern labor market, they see that their northern counterparts they are earning more. So, this wage differential encourages the southern workers to pack up and move to north, where they can earn higher wages and probably attain a higher level of utility. So, employers in the north also see that wage differentials and they realize that they can do better by moving to the south. After all the workers are equally skilled in both the regions. So, the farms can make more money by hiring cheaper labor. So, one possibility is that the workers may move from south to north, or it may possible that the employer they move from north to south. So, if the workers they are going to move from south to north, then what is going to happen? The supply is going to shift from in the south labor market as the workers they move from south to north, because the wage rate in the north is high as compared to the wage rate in the south. Now, as a result, the northern labor supply will shift, labor supply in the south market will shift to S dash n. So, the wages across two labor markets get equalized, and the movement will happen until there is one wage rate prevails in the both these markets. So, the convergence of the wages in these two markets would happen over a period of time and will settle down to a single wage rate in the economy. So, if the workers they are going to move from south to north. As I said, the convergence of this wage rate would happen if the farms could freely enter and exit in the labor markets. So, when these northern farms they close their plants and move to the south, so the demand for northern labor shifts to the left and lower the northern wage rate, whereas the demand for the southern labor will shift right and raising the southern wage rate. So, the incentives for the farms to move across the markets evaporates once this regional wage differential disappears and there is a convergence towards the single wage rate. So, as long as either workers or farms are free to enter and exit the labor markets, a competitive economy then will be characterized by a single wage rate. Now, when we talk about this movement and convergence of the single wage rate, the efficiency increases in the economy. The single wage property of a competitive equilibrium has important implications for economic efficiency. If you remember, in a competitive equilibrium, the wage equals the value of marginal product of labor. So, as the farms and the workers they move to the region that provides the best opportunities, they eliminate the regional wage differential. Therefore, the workers of given skill have the same value of marginal product of labor in all the markets. So, the allocation of workers to the farm that equates the value of marginal product across the markets is also the setting that leads to the efficient allocation of the labor resources. So, it is also easy to see how migration leads to an efficient allocation of resources by calculating the gains from the trade in the labor market, because the supply curves are there perfectly inelastic, which means that the value of time outside the labor market is 0. So, the total gains from the trade is given by the area under the demand curve up to the equilibrium level of employment. So, the migration of workers out of this south reduces the total gains from the trade in the south by this shaded area in the southern labor market, where the migration of workers into the north increases the total gains from the trade in the north by the shaded area in the north labor market. So, a comparison of these two areas reveals that the area of the northern labor market exceeds the area of this southern markets by a triangle which is ABC. So, which implies that the total gains from the trade in the national economy increases by the results of the workers migration from one market to the other market. So, when we look at this gains from this trade, this movement from by the workers from one market to the other market in terms of efficiency, we can see that the absolute efficiency in the economy increases by this triangle, by this movement. The surprising implication of our analysis should be clear that through an invisible hand, the workers and the farms that search for better opportunities accomplish a goal that no one in the economy had in the mind, an efficient allocation of resources. So, when we are talking about this, that the workers from the south will move to the north, they are trying to maximize their self interest to get maximum wages. So, they are trying to accomplish their goal of getting maximum utility by increasing their wages. However, in the economy as an aggregate, it leads to the efficient allocation of the resources. That is what this invisible hand theorem talks about that. So, at the aggregate, the economy gets the benefit, that efficient allocation of the resources. Many empirical studies they suggest that there is a need and there is also a tendency towards the convergence. The efficient allocation of workers across the labor markets and the resulting wage convergence are not limited to the labor markets within the country, but also might occur when we compare the labor markets across the countries. So, many recent studies have attempted to determine if the international differences in the per capita income, they are narrowing or not, the convergence of these regional wages, whether it is happening or not. The empirical studies typically conclude that when one compares two countries with roughly similar endowments of human capital, for example, educational attainment of the population, the wage gap between these countries narrows over time, with about half the gap they disappear within a generation. So, this result called the conditional convergence, because it compares the countries that are already similar in terms of human capital endowment of the workforce, and does not necessarily imply that there will be convergence in income levels between rich and poor countries. So, the wage gap between rich and poor countries can persist for much longer periods, because very low level of human capital in poor countries do not permit these countries to be on the same growth path as the rich countries. So, the convergence of regional wages and wage levels refers to the tendency of wages in different geographical areas to become more similar over time. And this phenomena often occurs due to the factors such as increase in the mobility of labor, changes in the industrial composition, and government policies how promoting this wage equality. So, as regions with lower wages experience economic growth and development, wage tends to rise and narrow the gap with the higher wage regions. Further, the convergence of regional wage levels can have certain significant implications on income distribution and labor market dynamics and regional economic disparities. So, the understanding of the drivers of this and consequences of this convergence of regional wage levels is crucial for the policymakers, economists and the business in shaping the effective strategies for inclusive growth and development. So, this is all about the convergence of wage and how in a competitive market single wage theory enhances the efficiency of the labor market and efficient allocation of the resources. In our next lecture, we will discuss about the impact of payroll taxes and subsidies on the labor market equilibrium. Thank you.